Hey, easy, you're okay. Hey, no, that that head injury, ugh. It's okay. Actually, it wasn't as much the explosion. It's more of really the bad spirits that you have in your head. But I learned a way. I can get them out. No, hey, hand me that drill. Hold. Yeah, no, we're going in.
Today we're going back, way back, to the origins of the combat medic. Long before antibiotics and medevac helicopters, the wounded relied on whoever could stop the bleeding the fastest, whether that was a priest, a shaman, or a barber with a sharp knife. Across ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and early empires, healers treated wounds, but medicine was still tied to ritual and magic. There were no organized battlefield hospitals, no formal medical corps, just survival. That changed in the classical world. For the first time, medicine stepped away from the mysticism and into observation, documentation, and structure. Now, this episode focuses on Western roots of battlefield medicine, the Greek, Roman, and European traditions that shaped modern combat medics. Other warrior cultures, such as the Persians and the samurai, all built their own systems of care, which we'll explore in future episodes. Egyptians were the first to write down medicine instead of just passing it by word of mouth. Around 1600 BCE, a scroll now called the Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus described 48 trauma cases. They had broken bones, dislocations, cuts, and even head wounds. It's the earliest known surgical text in history, and the detail is incredible. Each case starts with an observation, then a diagnosis, and then a treatment. Exactly how modern clinicians chart patients today. They clean wounds with honey and grease, use splints for fractures, and even recognize signs of spinal injury. But for all that sophistication, there's no evidence of organized battlefield care. Healing mostly happened in temples, carried out by priest physicians, under the eye of Imhotep, the Egyptian god of medicine. This guy, not this guy. To the northeast, the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians practiced their own brand of medicine, still half science and half sorcery. They had two kinds of healers, the Ashipu, who handled the spiritual side, the prayers, incantations, and ritual purification, and the Ashu, who mixed the herbs, balms, and poultices. Clay tablets from ancient libraries describe wound treatments that sound surprisingly clinical. They washed injuries with beer and oil.
Their fate hangs on the thumb of our final judge. Thumbs up!
Thank you, Chuck Norris.
Applied resins and wrapped them in cloth. A 3-step process that would honestly pass as medicine in some parts of the world today. But again, there's no sign of an organized wartime system. Their medicine stayed in the cities and temples, not the battlefield. Soldiers might get patched up by whoever was nearby, a comrade, a priest, or a family member, but there was no chain of evacuation, no designated healer, no official training. Across these early empires, healing was sacred, but not strategic. It belonged to priests and scribes because medicine was something that happened primarily after the battle, not during it. And that's what made the Greeks different. They took healing off the temple floor and onto the battlefield. Across the Greek city-states, the profession of iatros, the physician, was emerging. These were early doctors, trained not in temples, but in observation and reason. By the 5th century BCE, they were part of every major army, treating soldiers using principles that still echo through modern medicine today. The Greeks didn't invent battlefield medicine, but they did document it. In the Iliad, Homer describes the warrior Patroclus pulling an arrow from his comrade's leg, washing away the blood with warm water, and applying a bitter root to stop the pain. Archaeologists have found bronze scalpels, forceps, and probes in Greek sites that match Homer's descriptions perfectly. When 300 Spartans and their allies stood against Xerxes' Persian army at Thermopylae, spears broke, shields splintered, and men fell. But the wounded weren't abandoned. Historical records don't name combat medics, but attendants known as hypaspes or squires moved along the formations, pulling back the injured behind the phalanx, and the line advanced. These attendants, often younger men or lightly armed auxiliaries, carried wounded comrades to safety. Behind them, in the rear of the formation or at a nearby encampment, healers treated the wounds with wine, vinegar, and honey, all three proven antiseptics. The Greek didn't understand microbes necessarily, but they understood what worked. Wine has natural antibacterial properties, and that's thanks to what's inside the grape, but also in the fermentation process itself. First, grapes are packed with antioxidants, molecules that fight damage from oxygen and help slow bacterial growth. But more importantly, wine is full of organic acids, tiny chemical compounds like acetic acid, citric acid, lactic acid, malic acid, succinic acid, and tartaric acid. Each of these acids mess with the bacteria in a different way. Some of them make the wound too acidic for bacteria to survive. Others actually disrupt bacterial membranes. And if they ran out of wine, well, they reached for the vinegar. Essentially, wine that has undergone a further process, converting its alcohol into acetic acid, a compound still used today in modern wound care solutions. Honey is thick and sticky, which means it seals the wound from the outside world. That alone keeps dirt and bacteria out. But the real magic is biochemical. Honey is made of mostly sugar. The high sugar concentration pulls water out of the bacterial cells through osmosis, dehydrating them until they die. Then there's the acidity. Honey's natural pH sits around 3.5 to 4.5, which is too low for most pathogens to survive. And when honey comes into contact with wound fluids, an enzyme inside of it, glucose oxidase, slowly starts releasing hydrogen peroxide. So when Greek medics packed wounds with honey, they were doing three things at once. First, sealing the wound from new infection, killing the bacteria already there, and creating a moist, protected environment that actually accelerated tissue repair. In order for organized medicine to grow, it had to start with something unifying. For many, that is the Hippocratic Oath. Hippocrates told doctors to do no harm, respect patient privacy, and teach those who would carry on the craft. Before this, medicine blurred with religion and superstition. You didn't have doctors, you had healers, priests, maybe an uncle who survived a previous campaign and became obsessed with the idea that eating petrified liver of a goat is the way to be kept alive.
That's oddly specific.
Hippocrates separated medicine from magic. He said, observe, record, and reason. In his text on wounds in the head, he describes skull fractures, trepanation, and infection, not as curses from the gods, but injuries that could be treated through knowledge and care. For the first time, healing followed a scientific method and an ethical code, the same DNA carried by every medic today. By the time Rome rose to power, war was an industry. Like any good Roman enterprise, it was organized, efficient, and brutally effective. Before Emperor Augustus, medical care in the Roman army was ad hoc. Julius Caesar himself in De Bello Gallico makes no mention of organized treatment, only that a number of sick men had been left behind by the legions. When warfare was mainly taking place around Rome, that just meant that wounded soldiers were either taken care of in a nearby village or transported back to Rome to be treated. At the time, it was known to be the civic duty of a Roman citizen to care for wounded soldiers. As campaigns reached farther and farther, the wounded were often abandoned in small garrisons or towns while the campaign pressed forward. If they recovered, great. If not, they became another offering to Mars. This guy, not this. When Augustus became emperor, he addressed something that no generals had before: Sick soldiers don't win wars. He reformed the legions into a permanent professional army, fixed enlistments at 16 years, and even created a new tax, the aerarium militare, to fund soldier pay, pensions, and healthcare. Every Roman legion marched with its own medical corps. And since I've murdered enough pronunciations today, I'm going to borrow from a channel I follow called See You in History. The video on Roman medicine is linked below.
Professional categories in Roman military medicine included medici, veterinarii, optio valetudinarii, and capsarii.
Our first official ancestors, the medici, were specifically trained men who could tend to wounds both in camp and on the battlefield. Their jobs mirrored today's combat medics: bleeding control, stabilization, evacuation, and ongoing care at dedicated hospitals. Inside their massive stone forts stood the Valetudinaria, the first purpose-built military hospital documented in history. Archaeologists have even unearthed caches of surgical instruments, scalpels, forceps, probes, proving that trained medical professionals were embedded directly in the legions. They treated everything from arrow wounds to amputations, infections, and burns. Originally described as a cluster of tents, a flying military camp capable of housing around 200 men, it soon evolved into a permanent stone-built hospital integrated into every legionary fortress. Excavations at Baden and Housesteads show buildings with colonnaded porticos, multiple wards, isolation rooms, and indoor plumbing for sanitation. These structures could hold about 5 to 10% of a legion's strength. Sanitation was their top priority. Hospitals were built upwind of latrines and near clean water sources, with running water piped from aqueducts. Isolation rooms kept contagious soldiers separate, an early form of infection control. Roman scholar Marcus Terentius Varro even described disease being caused by tiny creatures that cannot be seen by the eye, which float through the air and enter the body. That's 2 millennia before germ theory. Now, these kinds of facilities wouldn't have been everywhere along the campaign, but the training and infrastructure knowledge followed the legions. These innovative lessons were spread across Europe, Northern Africa, and the Middle East. From these military hospitals came something far greater than battlefield medicine, the concept of public health. The same engineering mindset that designed roads and aqueducts began to shape cities. Clean water, sewage systems, ventilation, all tested in military hospitals, became staples of Roman civilization. Fast forward to the 11th century. The Crusades ignite, and out of the chaos comes a medical brotherhood, the Knights Hospitaller. Before they were warriors, they were caretakers. In the walled-in city of Jerusalem, this order founded the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, a sprawling complex built near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. At its height, it could house and feed up to 2,000 patients at a time. It didn't matter who you were, pink, purple, prince, or peasant. If you were sick or wounded, you were cared for. This wasn't a makeshift infirmary behind a siege line. It was a fully operational hospital, decades ahead of its time. Inside, there were dedicated wards, storage for food and medical supplies, separate quarters for men and women, and quarantine spaces to contain a disease. They maintained permanent staff, including trained assistants, physicians, surgeons, and clerics. Every bed was equipped with linen sheets, a rarity even among nobility. The hospital had running water and sanitation and ventilation systems cut into the stone to move air. Many claim this is clear evidence that the early caregivers understood the importance of hygiene. For the first time since the Roman Valetudinaria, medicine was being practiced at large scale by the elite warriors of their day. Some of the biggest innovations of the Hospitallers lay in their approach to medicine with military precision. They kept records of patients and outcomes. Written in Latin and often sealed with the order's cross, supplies were tracked, food rations, herbs, oils, linens, everything was accounted for. They even triaged patients by severity and prognosis, not by wealth or rank, to keep the system running more efficiently. And when the front lines shifted, so did the Hospitallers. turning fortresses into mobile care centers centuries before forward surgical units were a thing. Their greatest innovation wasn't just the architecture, it was organization. They pioneered mass casualty administration, record keeping, resource allocation, and systemic triage centuries before these words existed. Their black habit with a white 8-pointed cross became a symbol of mercy on the battlefield, a shape that would inspire humanitarian emblems all the way to the Red Cross and Red Crescent. Even as the Crusades collapsed, their hospitals didn't vanish. They spread. From Jerusalem to Rhodes, then Malta, the order carried its code of service forward. Their motto, pro fide, pro utilitate hominum, for the faith and in the service of humanity, is still alive in their descendants today, the Order of Malta, which continues global medical relief operations under the same symbol. From the wine-soaked wounds of ancient Greece to the echoing halls of Crusader hospitals, battlefield medicine has always walked hand in hand with innovation. Thank you for your time. If you found this interesting or have any feedback, please let me know below. Like and subscribe. I have some really exciting episodes planned and coming up. I'm the Longship Medic, and the mission continues here.